I always say, like, you are what you charge for. If you charge for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activities your people perform, you're in the services business. But you're in the experience business economically if you charge for time. Time, because that's what people are buying for, is the time they spend with you. So you think about going to a sporting event or a theme park or a nightclub or a movie or a concert or a play, all of those are admission fee experiences. And now you increasingly see restaurants that charge admission, or retail stores that charge admission, manufacturers that create experiences for which they charge admission, and so on and so forth.
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much. And it's a privilege to have you as a guest in our podcast.
It's my pleasure, Swami. It's great to be here with you and Vignesh.
Thanks, Joe. Let me dive straight away into something that you've talked about, which caught our attention, which is you really wrote this book on the experience economy way back in 1997, I would say. And you actually articulated a very interesting concept where you said goods and services are just not enough. And it's so true in 2022. So where did you think that idea came from, and why do you think it's so relevant even today?
Well, it actually came from my first book, which is called Mass Customization. And mass customization is about efficiently serving customers uniquely. So you give everybody exactly what they want, but do it at a price they're willing to pay. Right now here in the US, I don't know if it's hit India yet, but there's this big announcement from the toy company Hasbro, and like a half a dozen people have sent it to me. I've seen it on the news and that, where they're going to take, from photographs of your face, they're going to 3D print your face and put it on a superhero character, from Marvel Comics or from the Transformers or, I don't know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not sure all that they do. But all the action figures that Hasbro has, so that's an example of mass customizing, right? My face on an action figure. And I often had talked about that if you look at the distinctions between goods and services, that when you mass customize your good, you actually automatically turn it into a service. That if you look at the classical distinctions, goods are I lost the train of thought there on what on the exact nature of it for some reason. It's a senior moment of mine, but I'll say goods are made in manufactured in advance, but services are delivered on demand, so that that you create it when the customer says this is what they want, and goods are inventoried after production. But not done on demand. And goods are tangible, but part of the mass customization is the intangible service of helping customers figure out what is it they want. So when you make something done just for an individual person, you help them, they design it with them, then you make and manufacture and deliver to them. It's a service. Well, one time I was asked, what happens when you mass customize a service? And I shot back that mass customization automatically turns a service into an experience. And I went, wow, that sounds really good. It just popped out of my mouth. So it wasn't any analysis. It wasn't looking at all these patterns. It literally popped out of my mouth. And I said, okay, I got to write that down. And I began to think about it. I realized it was true. And I realized that experiences were a distinct economic offering, as distinct from services as services were from goods. That experiences are when you engage people as a business in an inherently personal way and create that memory as the hallmark of the experience. And so that means that there'd be an economy based off of experiences, just like there was an agrarian economy based off commodities, an industrial economy based off goods, a service economy. And now we're in an experience economy. And when I first started talking about it in the mid to late 1990s, it was the nascent experience economy, the forthcoming, the emerging experience economy, and now we just say it's here, and now you can see it everywhere. That's why we re-released the book in 2020 with a new preview on competing for customer time, attention, and money to get that notice out there that everybody needs to understand, what business are you really in, and that you should think about being in the experiences business.
So I think while we do while we have touched upon the nature of goods and services and uh, experiences, I think in most of your presentations, you usually kick it off with that amazing deck or that amazing slide on the progression of economic value, right? Because I think it's super important to set that context on how we move from an agrarian sort of a society into one that values goods and services. So, can you just walk us through a little bit about that specific model and how you came up with it?
The progression of economic value is the core framework in the experience economy, and it does talk about how economies have changed over millennia. That in the beginning were commodities, things you grow in the ground, raise in the ground, or pull out of the ground, then you sell them on the open marketplace, and that was basically the agrarian economy that lasted for millennia. In the U.S., I often talk about the fact that when the U.S. was founded in 1776, over 90% of the people worked on farms. And today that's less than 2%, right? In India, it's a much higher percentage still as well, but you see the same progressions over time where it used to be almost everybody and now things move. So we shifted into an industrial economy thanks to the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, where goods became the predominant economic offering, that people took commodities that they extracted out of the ground, they used them as raw materials to make goods, physical, tangible things that we touch and feel. And then in the latter half of the 20th century, we began to shift into a service economy. And a service economy is where services are activities that you perform on behalf of an individual person, right? Intangible activities. So we've shifted where, again, from 90% of the people working on farms, less than 2%, from at its high point, 40-some% of people working in manufacturing jobs to less than 8%. And now, where are all those people? Well, most economists would say they're all in services. And I remember early on talking to one presentation, one of the guys shouted out, he said, once you get 80% of it in one category, you need to split that category up, right? And that's exactly true. While most economists will still say experiences are part of services, they're a distinct economic offering because otherwise the category is too big. And it's also distinct because you charge differently for each one of these, right? I always say, like, you are what you charge for. If you charge for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activities your people perform, you're in the services business. But you're in the experience business economically if you charge for time. Because that's what people are buying for, is the time they spend with you. So you think about going to a sporting event or a theme park or a nightclub or a movie or a concert or a play, all of those are admission fee experiences. And now you increasingly see restaurants that charge admission, or retail stores that charge admission, manufacturers that create experiences for which they charge admission, and so on and so forth. So as you said, this progression, we originally, Vignesh, what we presented in the book as this sort of ladder. People call it about the ladder, where it goes up and to the right. And the first time we presented, though, the first journal article we ever wrote on was 1997. And it was called Beyond Goods and Services, Swami, just as you had talked about. And we presented it as a triangle, right, where you have this base of commodities and then goods, services, and experiences. And they all stand on top of each other. Right, you're never going to get rid of commodities because they have to form the raw material for goods. You never get rid of goods because that's what services are based on, and experiences are based on surrounding those services. But we had a client, actually, a strategy, the head of strategy at AT&T, who suggested the latter formulation. They thought it made more sense in that way, and that's what we've used ever since. And it's a great way of presenting it.
So, one of the things, Joe, which you really talk about is how experiences take a lot of inspiration from theater, right? And you really talk about this whole, inspiration from theater and how work is theater, right? So, what does it take for organizations to really become an experience company, right? So, what does it take for them to transform from a service organization or a manufacturing organization to an experience organization?
Yeah, there are a number of factors that you have to do. Now economically, again, charging for time is the key one. You need to get to that point. But what happens in all these economic shifts is companies give away the next level of value in order to better sell what they have today. My career, I started at IBM actually, first 13 years of my career, and IBM had a phrase that IBM means service, which meant we gave away whatever services you wanted as long as you bought our hardware goods. And then eventually we realized that, hey, people value the services. And now it's a service company that subsumes goods often into its service contracts. So in the same way, you have companies, restaurants, retailers, and others that give away the experience. They better sell what they have. But eventually you have to align what you charge for with what your customers value. And that means charging for that time. So that's one key element. A second one, think about it particularly for service companies, is that at its core, services are about time well saved, right? Time well saved. Most all services, I'll say it one way. All services are something we could do ourselves, right? Even if you hire a lawyer, right, and you're not a lawyer, well, you could go to law school, you could pass the bar, you could become a lawyer, and then you could do whatever contract you wanted to do, right? Think about how much time you'd have to spend on it. But no, this person has already done it, and so let them do this service for you. We go out to eat at restaurants and even fast food so much more than we used to, because we're allowing them to spend their time where they're very specialized and they're very good at it, and often they can do it better than I can do it. I let somebody else change change my oil in my car rather than doing it myself, because they can do it better, and I don't want to get dirty and so on and so forth. So it's, the history of economic progress is charging a fee for what once was free, right? That we used to do ourselves. And so that time well saved aspect of services, when you get into experiences, you then need to understand what people are buying as time well spent, right? Time well spent, that they value the time that they spent you, that's what they're buying from you. Again, classic experiences of sporting events and plays, concerts, movies, and so forth are all things where you're saying basically, entertain me, and even in theme park where you're doing much of the experience versus just being entertained, and playing sports and going to an art gallery and to a natural park and so on and so forth. Yeah, those are really about time well spent. So you have to make that switch. If you're a restaurateur and you charge for the food that you make, serve, and deliver, right, then you want to make it more experience. Well, how do I get them to enjoy the experience? How do I get them to view this as not just I'm serving them a meal like it would be more at a fast food restaurant, but they value the time that I am there? And so theater is then one of the easiest aspects to be able to do that. Because when you stage experiences, work is theater. And theater is simply being intentional about everything that you do. And so the distinction here between services and experiences is thinking about what versus how. So what are the functional activities you do, but how you go about them can turn any mundane event into an engaging encounter. My favorite example of that is a company in the US called the Geek Squad. And the Geek Squad was founded by a friend of mine, Robert Stevens, who wanted to get into the installation and computer repair business. And he said, well, who better do that than geeks? So he says that he doesn't interview prospective employees. He auditions them, right? Theater, right? Make sure you can typecast them as geeks. He then costumes them in white shirts, little black ties. The ties are clip-on just in case there's an altercation, he says. And with black pants and white socks, black shoes. The white socks really make that uniform pop. They drive around in these geekmobiles. Black and white Beetles look like squad cars. And then when they get to your home and to your office, the first thing they say is, "Hi, I'm from the Geek Squad." Right? Slowly step away from that computer, sir. And they go about giving you a computer repair experience with their Special Agent Geek Squad badge. And Roberts wants the computer repair experience to be so engaging that the customers can't wait till their computers break down. Right? So, other than showing the badge, everything he does is around the how, not the what. He's doing, all the Geek Squad agents, they do the same things as every other service company does, but how they go about doing it can turn it again into an engaging encounter and turn it into an experience. So that's the number one thing to think about as you shift from services to experiences. What is the theater that you create? One of the things that occurs to me also is that with theaters, it's not just about what people do, but it's the design of the time that people spend, right? You need dramatic structure. You need to rise up to a climax and come back down again. If you have a very flat experience where nothing much happens and everything is just sort of boring as you're going along, right? Well, then people are going to disengage. But if you create a great experience and you bring it up to that climax and come it down again, then that's the other key aspect of theater.
I just had this huge smile on my face because all this talk about theater and time and everything, it really reminded me of this old Hitchcock quote that I read from somewhere that I don't remember, but there's this quote that Hitchcock gave, which is, a good film is when the price of dinner, the theater admission, and the babysitter were worth it.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. Coming back on track, I think you were talking about ideas around the experience economy around 13 to 15 years ago, and this is pre big data, this is pre machine learning, and it's that kind of a world for folks to even imagine what that world is like. So 15 years ago. So can you talk to us a little bit about what was the feedback or even some pushback that you might have received for the idea of bringing forth this notion of an experience economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because I did used to get pushback. I almost never get pushback anymore. Now I just say it and people go, "Yeah, I get it." Because they recognize it in their own lives. But when I first started talking about the late '90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of pushback just from people who like philosophically didn't like the idea, that also were concerned about the jobs that were already being lost in manufacturing in particular, but they were lost long before that in commodity business, and in some cases now in services businesses as they commoditize. And so one of the things they often did just to get them to understand that economic change is inevitable is I'd ask them, how many people here have ever killed a chicken for dinner? And like you'd have 3 or 4 hands raised in a group of 50 people or something, and the other people would turn around and look at these people like they were from Mars because they just could never imagine having to kill a chicken themselves for dinner. And I said, you go back 100 years, guess what? Half the country killed chickens for dinner. Purdue Farms didn't exist. This is what you did. And just realize that. And then I asked the service guy, so how many people still change their own oil in their cars? And always fewer people change their own oil in their cars than people had killed a chicken for dinner. And I said, because that's a service that you want. So again, it's a matter of paying people for what we used to do ourselves. I said we all used to be responsible for our own services, for our own experiences. Excuse me. I remember when I grew up, the big weekly family experience was Sunday dinner. That Sunday dinner was different than every other night. It was in mid-late afternoon, not in the evening. Everybody was expected to be there. It was much bigger because you sort of skipped lunch and you didn't have dinner, and you sort of talked about your week and everything. And I had a good friend I remember that I would invite over for Sunday dinner on occasion, and he would have a great time, and because he was he didn't have any family in the area, so it was an experience that we had. Another one is birthday parties, right? When I grew up, moms would invariably throw the birthday party experience with handmade games like pin the tail on the donkey and things like this. And then over time, by the 1990s, 2000s, most moms, not everybody, but most moms would go someplace else and have them throw the experience for their kids and their friends, whether it's Chuck E. Cheese's or McDonald's Playland or a museum or some other bowling alley, some other place out there, movie theater too. And so that's just how the economy changes. So again, I rarely get that sort of objection anymore because you can't object because you can see it all around you. It's in the air that we breathe today. This notion that how much we prefer experiences over things.
So, Joe, one of the points that I wanted to talk to you about is this: when you want to build this experience ecosystem in a company, you have manufacturing, you have sales, you have a channel, you got marketing, you got supply chain, And one other thing is, if you really want to intertwine this experience across all these departments, it's one hell of a challenge, right? Because if I imagine I'm an insurance company, if I want to move to becoming an experience, what you call the in company, right? What you keep talking about, right?
Yep.
It's one hell of an experience because the channel is not something that I own, but how do I really transfer that experience for a distributor of a insurance? And that is a real challenge. And even today, if I'm an employee of a company, okay, unless until I am the actor in the theater, I just perform a function, right? So therefore, if we have to transform the way even we are remunerated is actually based on the industrial world models, right? So I would think that if you really want to do this, a whole host of other changes needs to be done across departments. So is that something that you see, and what are the real challenges and bottlenecks for doing this?
Yeah, that's a very insightful, Swami. That you do have to make all these changes, and it comes down to um, the core of deciding what business are you really in. Right. So management has to understand that, okay, we're in the experience business. Maybe it's not the whole business. Maybe it's a part of the business. Maybe it's something we want to do on top of our services. And so we need special people to be able to do it. But you need to sort of make that decision that we're going to be in the experience business, and then let that start to flow down and determine everything that you do. The theater, particularly for customer-facing employees, is one of the most important things to be able to do that. But there's many other things. In the re-release of the book in 2020, we positioned sort of everything as creating what we call robust, cohesive, personal, dramatic, and even transformative experiences. And those are the things that you want to focus on, is those five elements of experience. What many companies do in that situation, and I do highly recommend it, although it may not be for a forever thing, is to appoint a chief experience officer, right? CXO, chief experience officer, to really head the movement in that direction. And there's now thousands of CXOs around the world, and a lot of them are really focused on that internal transformation. I always think of it as both an internal and an external facing transformation, that you need to work on designing the experience, including those robust, cohesive, personal, dramatic, and transformative experiences. How do you design those experiences? You need to be the catalyst for change internally in the organization, and that you're holding up the North Star of what experiences are all about. You need to orchestrate all the capabilities together to be able to create those experience offerings. And then you need to champion the customer, or ideally, when you're talking experiences, the guest of the experience in the organization, as well as champion the organization to customers and the capabilities to customers. And then those are the key four roles of chief experience officers. And then finally, the last one is guide, because it is a transformational role that you need to guide the internal transformation it takes to shift from service provider to experience stager.
This is a very straightforward question, but it's also one that caught my attention, which is, Joe, why do you call Las Vegas the experience capital of the world?
It is a straightforward question. Have you ever been there? Everything about Vegas is about the experience. And it's not just a gambling mecca anymore, which is sort of its original thing. Sort of created by the mob as this place to go gambling in the desert. I remember working with one of the casino companies, early 2000s to late 2000s, and one of the points I made to them, I says, it's not going to be that long before other revenues surpass gaming revenues. Why? Because you can't, as much as they would like, you can't gamble 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they created these shows and they created these restaurants, and they Cirque du Soleil in particular, one of the most fabulous experiences in the world. Not just all you can eat shrimp, but 5-star restaurants with Michelin chefs and and then all these other types of experiences they have. They're even museums, and you could sort of see that their revenues, the gambling was going like this, but all this other stuff was going like this, and it was like 2007, when they passed. Now the profits of gaming is still higher, but that's going to shift as well, because they realized first it was sort of like, we're going to give away this stuff so they come and game. All we care about is the gambling revenues. And then they realized, no, we can make a lot of money on this stuff as well. So just everything you go there is about an experience. And it's also reason Experience Capital of the World is that everything you experience there is eventually coming to your town. In the U.S., most every state now has gambling. Often it's via American Indian reservations and so forth, with different rules that they can do. But governments are trying to make money off of it as well, and so they're opening up that gambling. You see the Cirque du Soleil appearing in other places as well, and one of my favorite examples of that is this device I love that's called the Gumball Wizard. Right? The Gumball Wizard is from Global Gumball, and it's a gumball machine. But what happens is a kid gets a quarter and he comes up to the gumball machine and he doesn't get a gumball, at least not right away. Instead, he gets this gumball spiraling experience, right? The gumball doesn't just go down and deposit, it goes spiraling down clickety-clack as it goes. And there's no functional purpose whatsoever for this device, right? It is totally for adding a layer of experience on this good. And you could say, actually, it's worse service. It's worse service. Why? Because it takes longer to get the physical good, the gumball that you requested. And so you got this manufactured good that's the same. You got worse service, but you add an experience on top of that. And then the value of the gumball goes up and they can charge more for it. Right? Well, I remember seeing kids go up to their parents, ask them for a quarter, come up to the Gumball Wizard slot, excitedly turn that crank, have the gumball spiraling experience, pick up the gumball, throw it away, and go ask their parents for another quarter. So it's really just a slot machine for kids, right? So that's what I mean, right? Las Vegas is coming to your town.
So Joe, I'm coming back to this. If we are moving to experience economy from a service economy, and 80% really becomes a experience economy. Can you give us some examples of companies where the appraisals, the bonuses, the remuneration, the mindsets, the skills needed, right, are of experience agents, right? I am a software coder. I need to be an experience agent, right? I am an insurance, marketing guy. I need to be an experience agent. And
Yep.
there's a certain amount of passion and purpose that's required. If you really want to be an experience agent, you just can't perform a function. I'm coming back to that question. And I find that to be the biggest gap between wanting to be an experience company and actually becoming an experience company. And what does it take to bridge this gap?
Right. That is a great question, and I can't think of any companies that really fit the bill in terms of shifting from service to experiences that have made that leap in that way that you're talking about. Though I'm sure there are, but one very related thing is where you need to therefore not just shift to, you need to stop doing things that were the old ways of doing things. So there, the key example occurs to me is Zappos, the shoe company founded by the late Tony Hsieh that Amazon bought a number of years ago for $1 billion. Now, they sell shoes online, but what they're famous for is their contact center. And their contact centers are experience agents. I don't think they use that exact term, but that's exactly what they are. They're not contact center reps. They are experience agents. They tell them to create a personal emotional connection with every customer that calls in, because they want that experience there. They want to remember the interaction so that the chances they come back and buy go up, the chances that they tell others go up, because they recognize it's not a one period model. It's just about this individual call. It's about the entire lifelong relationship we have with the customer. So the key thing they did is that they stopped measuring average handling time. Right, average handling time, standard contact measure for how long does it take for this customer and for us to get rid of them, right? And that's the attitude, right? How long does it take for us to get rid of them, get them off the phone? Because why? Because they're costing us money, not recognizing, no, this is a personal time that you have with a living, breathing customer. You should value it. You should make it time well spent. And that's exactly what Zappos does. In fact, for a long time, they celebrated every day the customer service rep, the experience agent, as you so rightly call it, who got to spend the most time with a customer that day. And the record is 10 hours and 43 minutes, right? If you can imagine that. One rep, one customer, and that customer, you're sure, is a customer for life, and then is going to bring other customers into them. So do think about what you stop doing and what you need to start doing as you make that shift.
So, culturally speaking, standards of great experiences vary from culture to culture.
Yeah.
So, when you take a company like Apple, which has been instrumental in exporting great design and great user experiences to its millions of users across millions of devices all over the globe, uh, where customers have different expectations on what great experiences are. How do you think a company like Apple is able to determine what is an extraordinary standard of experience for that scale of customers using its products, or Amazon for that matter?
Right. Well, Amazon's interesting too, because Apple is at its heart a manufacturer. Amazon at its heart is a service provider. And Apple specifically got into thinking about experiences first with basically the design of their products, right? That they wanted to make the using of the product into an experience. Well, you alluded to earlier our phrase "ing the thing," right? That we want manufacturers to ing the thing, which means focus on the using, right? If you use ing words, it means you're experiencing. I'm drinking, coffee from a cup. I'm typing on my keyboard. It means you're doing things that are experiential. So Apple really excels at that, the best in the world. But then they decided to get fully into the experience business with the Apple stores. And I remember when Steve Jobs first announced that they were going to get into retail, he really got lambasted in the business press. They said, what do you think you're doing? You're competing with your channel partners. You're going to tick them off. You don't know anything about retail. You're going to fail miserably. This was before the iPhone was invented. So they were selling iPods and Macs and everything. And he proved them wrong by creating not just a retail store, but a retail experience. And designed it experience, prototyped his experience. They went and examined many five-star hotels, for example, is where they took their lead from, like Ritz-Carlton's, to be able to think about the experience that people have when they look at it, when they come into it, what the interactions are that they have. So they went from that, they took that same level of beautiful design that they do and applied it to a retail experience as they do to as the physical goods. Amazon, I think of still as primarily a service provider. They've gotten into the experience business with Amazon Explore, where you can actually, like Airbnb experiences, you can buy experiences from Amazon that you do virtually or physically. They also have Amazon Live, which is sort of like the home shopping network, on the Amazon site where people are selling wares and that, and you can have a personal interaction with them. But where it really excels is it's time well saved on steroids. It's just like one click, boom, I got that. I don't think about it. It comes to my door, transaction done, and it's beautiful in that regard. But even they recognize that there's a little shift to experiences that they need to do.
ContraMinds is a podcast dedicated to decoding people, minds, strategy, and culture. We interview and learn from high performers so that you can apply these lessons on your journey to becoming the knowledge worker athlete you were meant to be. The ContraMinds podcast is available on all leading podcast players, and if you're interested in revisiting past episodes or taking a look at our show notes from this episode, please visit us at www.contraminds.com/blog. And now, back to the show.
Just doing a slight shift from experiences in your book. Look, you talk about 6 looking glasses. I thought that was a very interesting concept. Can you talk to us about 6 looking glasses?
No, because I didn't write that book. My partner Jim Gilmore did.
No, but
And so, so you really have to ask him. I would do a poor job of explaining it, but the basic, the basic idea is that is a book about observation. That if you want to innovate, first you need to observe. You look at what do customers want, and it is a great way of thinking about how you observe what's going on in this case in the world of business through those glasses that give you, each one of them give you a different perspective on any particular situation.
brilliant.
So, I could you talk to us a little bit about Lionel Trilling and his book Sincerity and Authenticity, and what impact did that book have on your work? And if I may be so indulgent, how it made you relook at things, if possible, at a personal
Yeah,
level.
yeah. So that's interesting. So shortly after the experience economy came out, it was like within 2 or 3 years, we began noticing that how much, when you talk about experience, how much people bring up authenticity. For me, I became a visiting professor at the University of Amsterdam, and I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands. And it seemed like every session I did, the first question would start with the same 2 words. It was always "you Americans," and it was more of an accusation than a question. Right? They'd say, "You Americans, you like your fantasy experiences, your fake experiences, your Disney experiences. We Dutch, we like real, authentic experiences." And this happened so much, I eventually developed a practice response to it, where I said, well, first understand that all experiences are authentic to you, right? As long as you're an authentic human being in some way, if you view them as authentic, they're authentic to you. And so in that sense, there's no such thing as a fake experience. But also that this is I always say this is an amazing question coming from a country like the Netherlands, which is just as manufactured as Disneyland is. Right? And they sort of go like this, and then they go, and they realize I'm right? Because half of the country has been reclaimed from the sea. It wasn't actually any land at all. It was water. There isn't, it seemed like square meter in the entire place that hasn't been moved, modified, or manicured to look as if it's always been there. It's the only place where I've ever gone for a walk in the woods and all the trees are lined up in rows, right? That's authentic to them, right? But we realized then that it really is an issue, and eventually what we realized is that authenticity was what we call the new consumer sensibility of the experience economy. That in other words, it was the primary buying criterion by which people choose what to buy and who to buy from. And increasingly, they didn't want the fake from the phony; they wanted the real from the genuine. So to really understand that, and that was the second book that Jim Gilmore and I wrote together, came out in 2007. That I always like to say that we read all of these philosophy books on authenticity, so you don't have to, right? So we read Lionel Trilling, Sincerity, Authenticity. We read Charles Taylor. We read Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and we read Heidegger. Well, nobody can read Heidegger, but we read it as well as we could to synthesize what they were doing. And Trilling had one particular impact, if I remember it right, which is that he was the one who pointed to Shakespeare's play Hamlet, which was perhaps the most existential of all plays, to be or not to be. And there's this, if I remember right, Act 2, Scene 3, but there's this point at which Laertes is going off to France, and his father Polonius is giving him his long series of advice as they're starting the trip. And it's filled with platitude after platitude and cliche after cliche until the very end. Polonius, or rather Shakespeare through Polonius, says something very profound, which is, "This above all, to thine own self be true. And it must follow as night to day, thou canst not then be false to any man." And we realized was that those 3 lines of the immortal barb contain the 2 key standards of authenticity. The number one, it's about being true to self, right? That's how we know We know we're being inauthentic when we're not being true to self. When we do things that are antithetical to who we are. That applies not just to people, but to corporations. When corporations do things that betray their heritage or their principles, their values, their meaningful purpose, and so forth, they're not being true to self. And then that last line about not being false to any man is not about the self to which you must be true. It's about how you represent that self in truth, or represent that self to others, right? So true to self is self-focused. And this is other focus, where it's a matter of, are you what you say you are, right? Is your offering what it says it is? Is your company what it says it is? And so those are the two key standards of what we call the real fake matrix in the book. And so those axes were inspired by thinking about that in Lionel Trilling, where you talk about that difference between sincerity and authenticity.
So, Joe, how do you see the correlation between authenticity and experience? Is there a strong correlation to great experiences having great authenticity? Do you see that as extremely
Yeah.
correlated?
There is a correlation, but it's not extreme. Right? We can all have experiences that we know are fake. In fact, the real fake matrix, what it says is that you can be real, fake, real fake, or fake real. And you can be perceived as authentic in any one of those, right? Because again, it's all about perception. And so, for example, many of the best experiences aren't in the real, they're in the fake real, right? What does that mean? It's where you create a fake reality. So Disney theme parks, for example, are fake realities. They're not what they say they are. That's not really Cinderella's castle, right? Mickey Mouse doesn't really exist. If they sprinkle pixie dust on you, you're not really going to fly. But they're wonderfully and marvelously true to themselves, right? So that's where they maintain things. They're true to self. They manicure everything to give you a particular impression. They're intentional about everything, and they stay true to self about what they're trying to accomplish in those theme parks. So they create a fake reality. Same thing with most places, right? You create a Harry Potter store to celebrate the Harry Potter movies. Well, you create a fake reality. Even you would say something like Italy, which is, I think, the most vibrant retail experiences in the world, retail stores. You're familiar with them, Vignesh, I see. That they're creating a little piece of Italy outside of Italy, right? So in that sense, they're not, truly what they say they are either, but they're having fun with it because they say Italy, EAT, right? Eat, Ali, right? Great, one of the best names in the world. So you can have wonderful experiences that are really in each one of those, depending on what it is and what you're looking for.
So should we take one question before going into the rapid fire? Okay. So I think a lot of these experience based innovations that we are seeing has been uh, truly or large implementation we've seen in the world of bits and not a lot in the world of atoms. And
Yeah.
I make that distinction because it's a lot easier to build stuff on the web than in reality, so to speak. Um, One of the reasons I'm asking this question is because there are several industries where people have put experience at the heart of the value proposition of that organization, like say EVs, electric vehicles, fintech, and co-working spaces. But there are those. But I also want to know what is your take on what will be the power of applying experiences to the unsexy but radically important parts of society, like say nuclear energy. We are in a climate crisis, so what will happen if we put the vision of experience in nuclear or healthcare or public policy for that matter? So, what are your thoughts on applying the experience framework at these really pivotal industries so that we can truly progress as a society?
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight that I mean, it can be applied anywhere. I always say not every company has to shift up to staged experiences, but all companies would benefit from. One of the ways, and one of the ways a lot of companies start as sort of an add-on to what they're doing, is to create what I call marketing experiences, and that experiences that do the job marketing, that generating demand for your core offering. So, and these can be physical or these can be digital experience. That's why you see so many manufacturers create flagship experiences like the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin, the Heineken experience in Amsterdam, the World of Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and so on and so forth. They're there to generate demand, and there's many different ways that you can do that. And you can do it virtually, by going on Roblox and having a concert and so forth, by creating your own virtual worlds. So that's one way. So even a utility, even an energy company could think about how they go about doing that. The other thing is then applying it to things like healthcare and others are particularly important. In fact, I probably have worked more in the healthcare industry with hospitals in particular because research has shown that the better the patient experience, the better the outcome, right? And that's the key with healthcare. And I think that apply in financial services and other industries as well, in education, that the better the experience, the more you're going to learn, right? That the better the experience, the more you're going to save and invest and so forth and do it well. So I think there's a lot of industries where that's the case and where you need to really, really think about the experience. It really, a lot of companies recognize it, but not everyone. It really is a core element of healthcare is the experience that patients have, that treating them as a whole person rather than a collection of symptoms. Research also shows that if doctors, back to acting, if doctors have poor bedside manner, as we say, don't act very well, people don't always understand the instructions. They don't always get it. They don't know what it is, and they'll follow their instructions much better if the doctor acts in a way that engages them and allows them to understand them and so forth.
A top-up question on what Vignesh just asked. What do you think about application of the experience principle in industrial products where decision making is extremely rational, right? Say I'm selling bearings, air compressors, which is the real, boring products if I were to call. Is there a way to envelop experience in these kind of industrial products?
Yeah, it's. I've written articles on that and worked with industrial companies, and so I'll change a little something that you said, Swami, which is people think that all decisions are rational. One of the things that science shows is that most all decisions are irrational, are emotional, even the ones we are really trying to be rational. And so if you can create an emotional connection, you're still going to try to you still get a preference, right, so to speak, right? If you're not completely out of the ballpark. And good salespeople have always known that, right? When they take clients out to dinner or they take them out golfing, they take them to a golf tournament or something. And so like I talked about those flagship marketing experiences for Guinness and Heineken and Coca-Cola and et cetera, you see the same thing happening in B2B. The one I like best is the Case Tomahawk Experience Center in the Northwoods of Wisconsin in the U.S., where Case Construction Company basically put in a lodge and they put in a giant sandbox and they bring clients up to actually play with the equipment. A lot of them grew up using the equipment, but now they're the heads of their companies. They don't get the chance anymore and say, well, here, try out the latest stuff, do all this. They have rodeos and contests about who can move the most amount of dirt in the shortest amount of time. And they did a study once that said that a normal customer goes up to a dealer of theirs, they have perhaps a 20% chance of getting the business, but they bring them up to the Tomahawk Experience Center and it goes up to 80%. Right? From 20% to 80% because the experience is the marketing. Right? Again, the best way to generate demand for any offering, whether it's commodity, goods, service, or another experience, is with an experience so engaging the customers can't help but spend their time with you, give you their attention, and then buy up as a result. So again, I know of scores, so I'm sure there are hundreds and maybe thousands of these sort of experience centers around the world that B2B companies are using as well. And then also there are some and many that would benefit by understanding theater, understanding the relationship that we have. Another aspect that applies to B2B and as well as consumer fields is the first thing that we talked about, which is where did the experience economy come from? And it came from mass customization, right? So I realized that mass customization turns a good into a service and a service into an experience. So one of the things to do as a B2B manufacturer is mass customize your goods and then mass customize your services on top of those, right? Use that customization to form individual relationships with your customers that grow and deepen over time and give you a preference for them. So that's another key dynamic going on, is mass customizing to shift up this progression of economic value.
That's a great answer, Joe. So we have a quick rapid fire questions, and I'm going to ask the first question to you, which is, what does success mean to you?
Success it's hard to be rapid fire with that question. Success is an amorphous concept, but so quickly I'll say success is, obviously enough money to support your family, live a decent life, but as more importantly, it is about fulfilling your purpose in life and doing what you love to do in a way that gives you enough material success to live by.
So, what are some of the books that have influenced you over the course of your life and career?
Number one, Future Perfect by Stan Davis. It changed my life. I read it when I was a strategic planner at IBM. He's the one who coined the term mass customization in that book from 1987. I got it into plans and strategies at IBM. When they sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree, I said, I'm going to do it on mass customization. Did it, wrote the book, discovered the experience economy, rest is history.
What would be your advice to an 18-year-old who is in a university today?
Any 18-year-old university, I think, should get out of the bubble of just your individual major, whatever it is, and expand beyond to understand what's going on into the world, right? And that includes, obviously, what's going on in economics, but politics as well, and culture and so forth. Always learn, and particularly if you are going into business now, learn how to present. Learn how to communicate, right? You can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if you can't communicate or present them, then it won't matter. And that's something you can start in college.
Who would be 3 or 4 guests that you would like to invite for a dream dinner?
Tough
And
one.
why?
So, and why? Whoa, hey, make it tougher. Let me see. Like, I'm sort of like empty my mind and see what immediately comes to mind. And So since it came in my mind, I'll say it. Right, Aaron Judge, right, is a New York Yankees ball player. I've been a huge New York Yankees fan since I was very young. Saw him hit a home run last night, even though the Yankees lost the game. So I'd like him to be there. In the world of business, I would love to talk to Howard Schultz. He as the CEO of Starbucks. He such a exemplar of the experience economy with Starbucks. He's come back to the CEO for the second time because for the second time he recognizes that they're commoditizing themselves. And I'm actually writing an article on this, a thought post for our blog right now. So that's one of the reasons on my mind, and the fact that he's willing to come back and really do the hard work of setting the company right again, I think is a great one. In terms, I'm trying to think also of other sort of pundits and gurus and book authors and who I'd really like to meet. I met Stan Davis, otherwise he would have been on the list from the beginning, but nobody's coming to mind there. So I'll sit with those two for now. That'd still be a great dinner.
That's great. What's one piece of advice that you got in your life which you would never forget, Joe?
I'll give you two from my father, who long ago told me that the answer to every question is it depends. And just to recognize that the situation really does matter in terms of what you're answering. The other thing is he was a great help when I was thinking about leaving IBM and starting my own business. It was after the book Mass Customization came out. IBM offered me and my wife both 6 months salary to leave, and should we do that or should we stay and so forth. And And I was really wrestling with this, and his advice was, son, whichever way you choose, you'll have a nice life. And it sort of like took the pressure off and said, okay. And then I would say, okay, well, then I'm going to go for it, right? I can always get another job. I'm going to go for it, see what can happen in this. And I'm very glad I did.
Joe, what is something that you believe in that nobody else agrees with you on?
I doubt there's a single thing that I have as a belief that no one else disagrees on. There's what immediately came to mind is some aspects of theology. I do a lot of studying of Christian theology and apologetics, and there's some things I've come up with that I couldn't find anybody that agreed with me, and it would take me a while. There's one, I got one over here, right? So at least I don't think I'm off the deep end. But I'll give you one lately in business that will require a little more than a rapid fire answer, because we haven't talked yet about the fifth and final economic offering in the progression of economic value, which is transformations. Transformations, when you use experiences, the raw material to guide people to change. We talk about healthcare, where it's the outcomes that matter. That's what transformations are about: outcomes, not about inputs of the experiences. Fitness centers, coaching, management consulting, B2B, all those are them. And I've had several people lately want to protest and say there has to be a sixth one, because I always say it's the fifth and final, as I did then. And so so people have it's not that no one agrees with me, but there are people that are now objecting to that and wanting to try and find that sixth one, even though I've got very good reasons why it's only five.
Great. So our last question, Joe, really is, now that you've heard and talked to us in ContraMinds, who would you think is somebody who you would like to see as a guest in our podcast? That now that you know what we do, who would you think would be a guest who you believe would be a great addition to our guest list?
I would suggest James Wallman, who, among other things, is the founder of the World Experience Organization, the WXO. He's in London. And he's written a couple of great books and comes from around experiences, cites the experience economy, of course. But one of the things he specializes in is on the personal level. Right? I'm a business guy, and I want to tell businesses what they should do. I've been accused of being, sort of like pro-business and not saying that. I said I'm guilty as charged. He also looks at it from a consumer side, right? So one of his books is Time and How to Spend It. So he says, looking at all the social science research, right, is that time is the currency of the experience economy. It's all about time well spent. Well, then how should you spend your time? And does a great job with that. And again, as founder of the World Experience Organization, has a wonderful set of experiences and people that he talks to and a perspective that I think would be valuable.
Thanks a ton, Joe. It was a fantastic conversation, brilliant examples. I would say the articulation of time as a currency for experience, and some of the examples were extremely, brilliant, and it was very vivid as you explained it. So thanks a ton, and thanks for taking time and talking to us.
Super. It's been my pleasure, Swami. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks for listening to this episode. For selected links and detailed show notes, visit www.contraminds.com/blog. Follow ContraMinds on social media and let us know who you would like to see next on the podcast. If you're listening to ContraMinds on Apple Podcasts, do share your comments and give us a rating. We are keen to know what you're thinking. ContraMinds is also on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and stay up to date on all our releases. Thanks for listening and stay safe.